In this experiment, you're asked to determine the factors that affect the growth of yeast, and you need to design a procedure for determining this, including at least 2 variables. Now, a variable is anything that can affect the results of the experiment, and there are 3 different types of variables. For example, if you were trying to determine the amount of water a plant needs to grow best, there might be many variables. For example, you could use different plants, different amounts of water, different types of water, change the temperature, or change the soil. All of these would have an effect on the experiment. All of these are variables. But in order to have a fair test, you need to control the variables by keeping all the variables the same except one. So you might have 2 identical plants, water one once a day, water the other plant twice a day, and see if there was any difference in the growth rate. But what if one plant was put in the sun and the other in the shade? Now you don't know if it was the amount of water or the amount of sun that determined the growth. So scientists say if you want to have a fair test, you need to control the variables in an experiment and test only one specific variable at a time. The variable that changes in an experiment is called the independent variable. The dependent variable is the factor that is affected by the independent variable. So in this case, the amount of water is the independent variable because that changes, and the growth is the dependent variable. All the other factors are the controlled variables, such as the type of water, the temperature, the amount of light, etc. Now, what if you were designing an experiment to see which type of plant grew faster? What would be the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the controlled variables? Well, the independent variable is the type of plant, so you might use 2 different kinds of plants. The controlled variable is the thing that stays the same, or the things that stay the same. So you'll give the 2 plants the same amount of water, the same amount of sun, the soil will be the same. All of the controlled variables will stay the same. And the dependent variable is the thing you're trying to test for, how fast each grows. In the experiment you design, you need to determine the factors that limit yeast growth. Will it grow under any conditions, or does it grow better under certain conditions? Now, yeast needs 2 things to grow. If you combine it with sugar and water, it will grow. So when you design this experiment, you need to think about the controlled variables, the things that you aren't going to change, and the independent variable, the one factor you're going to change. You might consider temperature, time, amount of moisture, or anything else that can be varied. And you already know that the dependent variable is the amount of growth, which you might determine by qualitative observations, such as watching, or quantitative measurements, such as the amount of time or size. And depending on which variable you choose, your data and observations might take a different form, but make sure you keep them organized and clear. So whenever you're doing an experiment, always keep in mind the 3 different types of variables.